4 notes. So what we're going to be looking at are a couple of different terms. Circumscribed quadrilaterals, common internal tangents, and common external tangents. Let's get to it. So a circumscribed quadrilateral. When we circumscribe something, think like circumnavigate, right? Circumscribed, the prefix means around. So when we talk about a circumscribed quadrilateral, we're talking about a quadrilateral where the is drawn outside of the circle. But it means that all 4 sides must be tangent to that quadrilateral. So that means that we have points of tangency here, 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 and here. Now, if you remember from the last notes, if you think about the vertices, let's say that's A, and then here's B. Let's clean that up. Here's B, right? And then this is vertex C over here, and D. Those are all points that have a common tangent coming from them, which means, if you think about it carefully, this is congruent to this is congruent to this, and this is congruent to this, and this is congruent, this here is congruent to this. So all those pieces, right? Now, that can be useful, but it's probably better to look at it this way. When you're looking at these common external tangents, these points, that means if this is length x, then this has got to be length x, right? Which means if you're looking at this tangent here, let's call that length y, and that's from here, from the tangent to this point. Then from the tangent to this point, let's call that y. And kind of moving around the circle to each vertex, let's say that's z. And because I've run out of letters, I'm going to go back to the beginning and go to W. So what that means is the following. If you look at this, that side length there is x plus y for the whole thing. This side length is equal to y plus z. And this side length is equal to w plus x, wx, right? And this side length is equal to w plus z. Big deal, you say. Well, watch this. W and z, x and y. So if you look at the opposite sides, they are the sum of all 4 letters. And if you do the same over here, w, x, y, and z. So what this means is the sum of the lengths of the opposite sides are the same. Now this will make some sense once we start taking a look at some examples, but the key thing to take away here is that when you have a circumscribed quadrilateral, the sum of the lengths of the opposite sides are the same. Like I said, this will make a little bit more sense when we look at it. We'll start looking at some examples. So the next thing is something called a common internal tangent. So if you're looking at this, you see a tangent that is tangent to this circle and tangent to this circle at these 2 points. So this circle has some radius, right? This is the radius right here. This is the radius of the larger circle, and this would be the radius of the smaller circle. Now we know that there are right angles formed. You can see those right here because this is a tangent line. Now they say it's internal. This dashed line right here, this dashed line right here represents the distance from center to center of the circles. Some could say, or you could think of that as how far apart the circles are, because you measure that from center to center. Now, I'm going to add a little construct here. I got a little triangle here ready to go. what I'm going to do is move this up and overlay it. And what I've done is I've taken the distance between these. So if you're looking at this, the distance between these two sides, the distance between these two circles is that right there. And if you look at this black line and this red dashed line here, they're parallel, and it turns out they are congruent. If you look at that, you can see a kind of a sliver of a rectangle there, which means that this represents the length of the tangent. And we'll just kind of move this over here. So this represents the length of the tangent right here. So that's one side of this right triangle. And what that also then means is this length over here, if you look at this carefully, this length all the way here, so the other leg of the triangle, that is the other leg of the right triangle, because we only mentioned legs when we're talking about right triangles, that is the sum of the radii. So that's the radius of one of them plus the radius of the other. Now I haven't really said what's what, but let's go ahead and say that this radius here, let's say that's r sub 2, and that's r sub 1, right? That means that there's a triangle formed where the length of the tangent is one leg of the triangle, the sum of the two radii is the other length, other leg of the triangle, and the hypotenuse is the distance between the circles, sometimes known as how far apart the two circles are. Okay? So basically what this means is if you know a couple of these lengths, like if you knew the radii, then you could figure out one leg of the triangle. So you know the radii of both circles. And let's say you knew the length of the tangent. Then you could figure out how far apart the circles are. Or if you knew how far apart the circles are, and you knew the radii, then you could figure out the length of the tangent. Of course, all using the Pythagorean theorem. So common internal tangent, one of the legs is the sum of the radii. Something similar with the common external tangent. Difference here is this tangent, so our tangent right here, this tangent right here, does not cross the line that represents how far apart they are. So this is a line that represents how far apart the two circles are. And the external tangent would look like this. Does not cross between the two circles. Pretty commonsensical. Now, I've constructed yet another right triangle that I'm going to overlay here. And if you look at this carefully, what I've got is the hypotenuse being the green, representing the distance between the circles. I really don't want to spell circles correctly, apparently, but that would represent the distance between the circles. The length of the tangent would be here in red, and that would be the length, sorry, let's get that color correct here, length of the tangent. Now the difference is, so this is very similar to the last when you had a common internal tangent. So one leg is the length of the tangent, just like before, and the hypotenuse is the distance between the circles. The difference is quite literally, well, the difference. If this has a radius right here, right? Let's call that the radius there. Let's put that in blue. That would be r sub 1. Then that means we're looking at this length here also being equal to r sub 1. If you look carefully, you can see a right triangle, right? And that would mean that this right here would be r sub 2, the radius of, in this case, the bigger circle. What does that mean? To find the length of the other leg of the right triangle formed, you take the difference That is, you subtract the two radii. So for a common external tangent, the hypotenuse would still be the distance. The length of the tangent is one of the legs, but the difference between the radii, that is subtracting the radii, will tell you the other leg. This means if you know 2 out of 3, you can find the third using the Pythagorean theorem. Like I said, examples will make this a little bit clearer. Quick recap, common internal tangent, one of the legs is the sum, that is you add the two radii. Common external tangent, one of the legs is the difference, that is you subtract. So to sum up, we've talked about circumscribed quadrilaterals, that is quadrilaterals drawn around outside of a circle such that all the sides are tangents to it. Common internal and common external tangents, and how you can form right triangles, our favorite thing.